All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We are very happy, we meaning the Tour for Diversity in Medicine, to be partnering with the Student National Medical Association and the Latino Medical Student Association for what is now our fourth year doing this Road to Residency program. We are awfully excited. And we heard, Dr. Clark and I, that there was an amazing webinar last week. I unfortunately wasn't able to join, but we heard there were a lot of questions. There was a lot of interest. And so hopefully we'll get that same sort of energy tonight. That's what we're looking for. We will really jump into the subject matter tonight quite shortly, but I wanted to make sure that we really made an introduction of what this whole road to residency piece is, and actually, more importantly, at least to me, what the Tour for Diversity in Medicine is, because many of you may not be completely clear about actually our relationship to SNMA and LMSA, but actually we were founded out of technically both of the organizations, but really it's a larger concept of how can we further explore what diversity in medicine is. And so we created this separate nonprofit that partners with SNMA and LMSA in every way. And we've been around now for about 10 years, which in and of itself is a huge feat. But really quickly, Dr. Clark, before we jump into the subject matter, why don't I let you introduce yourself?
All right. Thank you, Dr. Matthews. Good evening, everyone, and pleasure to be with you all this evening and looking forward to this discussion. I'm Dr. Frank Clark. I'm originally from Chicago. I did my medical school training at Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine. Prior to that, I was at Monmouth College for undergrad and majored in biology. After medical school, I went over to Palmetto Health Richland Hospital, which is now Prisma Health in Columbia, South Carolina, where I did my residency in psychiatry. And now I've been in practice almost 10 years. I'm currently practicing in Greer, South Carolina, and enjoy teaching residents and medical students. And I do a mixture of I'm in different clinical settings, so I do some consult liaison work, as well as seeing patients in the emergency department and on an outpatient basis. And I've also done inpatient psychiatry. So looking forward to our discussion.
I always love doing these webinars with you, Frank. Thanks for joining tonight. As far as myself, I am Cameron Matthews. I'm a family physician based out of Washington, D.C. I've had a range of positions both in and outside of academia with a real focus on marginalized communities. I started in correctional medicine, went on to a couple of federally qualified health centers, then into leadership at the national level of the Veterans Health Administration, and am now chief health officer with a company called City Block Health. That could be a whole nother series of webinars, these different new practices that are popping up, but I'm kind of excited to help lead one now. But honestly, no matter where we are in our careers, right, Dr. Clark, what we're talking about tonight, as far as how you really tell your story, your personal statement, your CV, it doesn't matter where you go in medicine, you need to get this right. So we need to focus not only on what is appropriate as we move into the residency process for the students we're talking to tonight. But honestly, every step along your entire career, this is a critical skill that you guys need to excel at. So we're happy to bring you several perspectives, I would say, to hopefully get you on the right path. I like to brag about the Tour for Diversity in Medicine, but actually, I just want to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Clark for joining us. We have about 50 or so mentors, we call ourselves, that volunteer to do this type of workshop, whether it's in person or virtual. We've been mainly virtual lately, but hopefully we'll get back in person. But more importantly, we're really excited, to be honest, to be doing this sort of program for medical students, because typically the tour really does focus on high school and college students, but this Road to Residency program is really in an effort to recognize that the pathway into medicine is needs support along every stage, and we're happy to do so. So, Dr. Clark, I'm going to hand it over to you, and I'll jump back in later.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Matthews. So I'm going to talk about the personal statement, the the nuts and bolts, kind of, so to speak, of the personal statement. So we have this example here. I'm going to read it out here. So, becoming a physician is a goal aspired to by many. As a farmer's son, I have wakened early and returned home late from the fields after long days with my father. I have been able to experience uncertainties, challenges, and plain old hard work similar to that faced by physicians. But like the doctors in the hospitals and Dr. Smith in his lab, I can find happiness and satisfaction in helping people through medicine. Despite all the hardship doctors face, I want to help provide every day. Practicing medicine is something worth stress and long hours. I finally understand my father. I know now how he can wake up every morning at 5 a.m. and drive his dirty green tractor until 7 p.m. So let's pause for a second here, okay? So you may say to yourself, well, that seems like a nice opening, or a good example of what residency programs are looking at for a personal statement. But actually, that's not what we're looking for. It's a very generalized statement. And so what I would take from this example is that it's pretty generic. It's not really scratching the it's just scratching the surface, right? It's not really going deep, right? You want to go beneath the iceberg, right? You want to I'll nerd out for a little bit, right? You just don't want to be at the epidermis. You want to hit the dermis, right? You want to go deep, all right? So this is this hitting the epidermis layer, all right? So if I were reading, if Dr. Matthews and I were reading this personal statement, this almost sounds like a personal statement of an applicant applying to medical school. And you all are not applying to medical school. You're past that, right? You have made it to medical school, and now you are ascending up the ladder onto your journey to residency. So this is not something, this is an example of what not to do in your personal statement. So, which brings me to the next point of we want you all to set yourselves apart, right? You're no longer thinking as a undergrad who is applying to medical school. You are now seasoned by, an extra 4 years in your educational career and your pursuits, and now we want you thinking like a person who is applying for residency. And so what does that entail? So a couple of things here. um, Bullet point number one talks about, your statement should express your personality and style. Self-reflection. We want to know who you are. Okay, what makes you stand out from applicant B or applicant C? All right, you have now chosen a specialty within the field of medicine. Okay, that can be internal medicine, psychiatry, family practice, neurology, PNMR, whatever that may be, pediatrics. You have to sell us on who you are and why you want to go into the field that you have, the specialty that you have chosen. So when you're thinking about this, again, what helps you stand out? What are you going to be looking for in a program? But not only what you're looking for in a program, but what you're going to bring to the program, and what are some meaningful experiences that have helped solidify your decision to go into X or Y specialty. This is a couple of good resources here to check out. The AAMC, you have the University of Washington School of Medicine. They have different like brainstorming things that you can do on their website, looking at your personal statement to think about personal and professional goals. I encourage you to check out some of these websites because they've got a wealth of information that can help you structure your personal statement. Your personal statement means a lot. Okay, people, you got to remember when we're looking at these applications, we get thousands of applications. So we got the pal that says this is a exceptional pal, and then we have the mediocre pal. You don't want to be in the mediocre pal. You want to be in the this is someone I would like to get to know. All right. So we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but just to reiterate the points. Um, Skill sets, clinical experiences. Talk about a meaningful experience on your, let's say you want to go into pediatrics, on your pediatrics rotation. What was it about that patient that came in with Kawasaki's disease, for example, that was so memorable for you that you want to um, uh, illustrate that in your personal statement? Be reflective. You all are, again, you've now had 4 year, going to have 4 years under your belt. That's 4 years of moxie and grit that you've endured, and I'm sure you got a lot of reflection. You should, hopefully. Um, Talk about the maturity and growth that you have had over these 4 years, right? Each stage in your educational career should foster a growth mindset. All right. And again, how will you benefit the program, right? This is a reciprocal relationship. Okay. It's not a one-sided thing, right? It's not just, oh, I'm hoping to gain this from this program. Programs want to know, what are you bringing to the table? Okay. So it has to be a good fit for them, and it also has to be a good fit for you. Address any knowledge issues or red flags. So I want to definitely emphasize this point. So we all go through different struggles, whether that be an undergrad, that may be in medical school, or that may occur to you as a resident. It definitely may occur as an attending. It's this life, right? Life happens, things happen. Do not be afraid to address things that have come up in medical school. So if you were unsuccessful in passing step one or step two, or you had to repeat a course or a rotation, or you didn't pass your shelf, that's going to come up, right? That's going to be in your MISP or in your application. So it's best to just acknowledge it, talk about it, but don't let it define you. More importantly, what did you learn from those experiences? So self-disclosure. I've didn't pass step one on the first try when I was in medical school, and I repeated it on the second try. I did fine. I also didn't pass my surgery shelf, and then I failed my first year of medical school. So I had to be prepared to talk about all of those red flags in my application because I knew that they were going to come up. But I didn't let those things define me. I talked about what I learned from them about resilience, about perseverance, and how I was going to use those experiences to thrive in residency. So don't let these red flags be a hindrance. Consider them as something of, hey, I've endured this, I've suffered this through this, but through this adversity, this has made me a better person. Remember, as a physician, you want people who we're looking for individuals who are adaptable, who have been resilient, who can weather the storms, because as a physician you're going to be weathering many storms. And then finally, we talked about use to highlight additional meaningful and impactful experiences, which we've kind of highlighted already. Okay, things that you do not want to do. So we gave that example with the farmer and the son and the father, right? Avoid broad general discussions. Be specific again, right? This is not applying for medical school, right? So be as specific as possible about what it is that you're doing. Don't just say, "Oh, I've done research." What about your research in pediatrics, for example, has prepared you for what you plan to embark on as a resident in a pediatric program? Health equity is a broad term. So what is that? I mean, we know what health equity is, but explain it to us. What in the realm of health equity are you doing, right? So maybe you've published a paper regarding health disparities. Maybe you have been volunteering at the free clinic in your local state, and you started or you implemented a quality improvement project to address healthcare disparities. Talk about those things, right? This is where these meaningful experiences come into play. Do not, and I repeat, do not reuse your medical school personal statement. It's not going to get you anywhere. Okay. Do not waste space on explaining why you want to be a physician. Again, you are not applying to medical school. So, kind of think back about when you were in high school or in undergrad and you were maybe having to do those, like stand up and give a speech, or you were writing a paper, right? Our professors would always say, know your audience. This applies here. Know who you are speaking to. You are not speaking to people who are interviewing you for medical school. You are speaking to people who are interviewing you for a slot in their residency program. So tailor your message to your audience, right? You got to sell your brand. Okay. Our colleague, Dr. Thais Gaines, would say, sell your brand. Who are you, right? Sell your brand and make sure your brand is up to par. Do not rehash what is otherwise included in your application. So a lot of times, um, we don't we repetition can be good in some ways, but in this case, if you've already talked about a certain thing, maybe in your CV or other parts of your application, you don't need to rehash that in the personal statement. Make it something new, something fresh. Okay. Spell check and grammar check. Okay, so one of our pet peeves of reading things is when people do not grammar check and spell check. Okay, remember, you are interviewing for a job. Okay, so we don't know who you are, right? We see a picture, we see your application. We have not yet met you. So, first impressions are everything, okay? Please spell check and grammar check. Microsoft Word is there for a reason. They have a spell check. They have a grammar check. Now, I wouldn't just trust Microsoft Word. Read it out loud. Read your statements out loud. Or find someone who is maybe an English major who's very good at grammar, have them read it. My wife edits all of anything that I write, she edits it. She is, all about punctuation and everything, and she'll say this is a run-on sentence. I'm thankful for her. So find somebody who you trust that's going to be honest with you and say you need a period here, you need a comma here, a semicolon, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, ask others to review. One other thing with this is that you're going to have your first draft of your personal statement should not be your last draft. If it's your only draft, something is wrong. Okay, I'm not saying you need 9 drafts, but you definitely need more than one. Okay, moving on to let's see here. Okay, so first edition of a real statement. When I think of my future role in medicine, I envision being a physician that will face a broad spectrum of clinical scenarios instead of narrowing my focus on only a single specialty. Emergency medicine is the medical field that gives me the best opportunity to both see a diverse range of patients, and to address their concerns through hands-on procedures. The mystery of not knowing what patient will come through the door is an invigorating challenge that I will enjoy tackling on a day-to-day basis. Additionally, working in the emergency department includes interacting with individuals who are often caught up in the worst moments of their lives. I endeavor to be a positive force that can help to soothe patients through such vulnerable and traumatic situations. Most importantly, emergency medicine allows me to care for all people despite their socioeconomic status or whether they have insurance. As an aspiring emergency physician, I aim to ensure that every patient admission will receive optimal care. Okay, that's not bad. Okay, that's better than the first statement, right? That we read about, the father and the son and the farmer and things, right? This is actually hitting this is actually hitting the dermis, right? This is going a little bit deeper than what we read, but I would say there's still room for improvement. Okay, so we're getting there, but we can still improve. All right, so 9 months later, right? Again, different draft. Okay. Sometimes you got to step away from things and let it marinate a little bit, let it percolate in your mind. So, there is no better calling in life than helping your fellow human being when they are at their lowest. Growing up in New York, I was often exposed to the homeless and vulnerable populations of the city, some at their lowest points in life. As I grew older, I used opportunities to engage the homeless through volunteer work. It was this early exposure and time spent that laid the foundation for my current career goals. After completing college, I spent the years between undergrad and medical school volunteering at a homeless shelter in Baltimore. It was here I met a true community advocate, a nephrologist who worked at the shelter. I personally saw the impact a physician can make on vulnerable lives. I worked with him for months on end and witnessed how he brought smiles and saved lives by providing nebulizers, medications, and personal medical advice. This allowed the residents of the shelter to have access to health care, much needed medical advice, and supplies to prevent them from deteriorating or becoming hospitalized. One day, when a patient presented with hypertensive urgency, he drove them to the emergency room. Although he was a physician, he was not equipped or trained to handle emergencies. It was then I realized I wanted to be the kind of physician that mastered resuscitation and could be counted on in an emergency, one that does not turn anyone away and works with the underprivileged. An emergency medicine physician fits perfectly. Okay, so nailed it. This is meaningful, right? This is a very good example of this applicant who has been specific about what he or she, why he or she is wanting to go into the field of emergency medicine, right? It's specific, they lay out they give you a sense of who they are and what this experience has meant to them, right? They talked about serving, under resourced communities. They've talked about like why they feel like emergency medicine is right for them. Again, that first draft wasn't a bad draft. It was decent, but again, this is better, right? This gives you a sense of, hey, this is a meaningful experience for this person. Furthermore, we interview this person, when we invite this person to interview, Dr. Matthews and I are going to ask some questions about this and say, hey, really enjoy reading your personal statement about, the experiences that you talked about in Baltimore, and had a couple more questions for you about that, right? It gives some talking points for us, and that way, it helps. It gives advantages to the applicant as well, because again, you want to have things to talk about during the interview, and you are able to see that person's passion shine through. Okay. All righty. So, Dr. Matthews, your show. You're on mute, Dr. Matthews.
You would think after years in the pandemic, I say that every time too, because it happens every time. Here we go. Thank you, Dr. Clark. I love the progression of the statements. And we have one question. Do you have an average number of drafts you think should be done, right? I would say more than one, like you said, right? Because I think more than anything, you need to get a sense of the people who are reviewing it, who are giving you that feedback. But you see here, even through just the progression from that first one where they defined emergency medicine for themselves, but then moved to the next one where it had a lot more specificity and it helped the reader distinguish why this person wants emergency medicine over another field, right? I thought that was a great example. One thing we definitely need to point out to everyone, and we're going to have another webinar on this on Thursday, so please join there as well too, is that we've got some significant changes really coming to play with the ERAS this year, and we'll make sure we highlight those. Dr. Clark highlighted the fact that you can use your personal statement for meaningful and impactful experiences. There's ways to really make sure meaningful and impactful experiences that you otherwise haven't listed in other parts of the application. If you were listening, he definitely said, make sure you're not being repetitive in your application, right? Another place that you can potentially speak about experiences, or actually, more importantly, get someone else to speak about those experiences, perhaps with you, or summarize them, is through your letters of recommendation, right? So as you're applying, as it was for medical school, as you're applying for residency, think of the entire application process and all of the different components as another way to drop more information about you into the selection committee's lap, right? And so the letters of recommendation, this isn't just someone sending along something with an important name. This is actually a really important opportunity to share more information about you. The most important part, hands down, though, before you actually get to the content of the letter of recommendation, is to make sure that you frame up the ask the right way. This will make or break you. I know you all remember, unfortunately, the stress that we had in getting those letters together for medical school. It is even more critical on the residency side. We take these extremely to heart because, again, we're at a more intensive part of this selection process as you're choosing your specialty field. So you need to make sure you're asking even earlier than you might have during the medical school process or application process a couple of years ago. You need to make sure that you're providing those clear instructions, because particularly if you're asking some older attendings who aren't as familiar with ERAS, it changes every year or almost regularly. They may not be as familiar. So you want to make sure that they understand how they can actually get those letters returned, whether they're uploading electronically or the like. These are the little details that, again, you need to be aware of, and you need to be thinking of how you make this letter creation as easy as possible. Not just creation, actually, letter submission as well, as easy as possible. Make sure the ask again is really focused on whether they can write a strong and a positive letter of recommendation for you. It still goes that there is some negativity out there. I've read some letters where they do not speak entirely favorable on part of the student. And it's a damn shame because that really means that the student wasn't savvy enough, wasn't close enough, didn't have that very frank discussion to assure that the person writing on their behalf was really their advocate. So then moving on to the content, you guys have to get more comfortable with this. I meet students all the time who are very uncomfortable with this, but you have to. This is how it works throughout the rest of your career. You need to be ready. In fact, do not wait to be asked to provide a draft or some sample language that will be included in a letter of recommendation. If you're trying to highlight additional meaningful and impactful experiences that you couldn't fit in earlier, if you're trying to really elaborate maybe on some troublesome points that you've had in your career and the like, there's no one that's going to be able to explain that better than you. You also have to remember that these faculty members are extremely busy. Yes, Dr. Clark and I can spend a random hour with you guys on a Tuesday evening, but the average person doesn't have this availability, number one, and they're probably writing multiple letters. You need to, I still do this. When I need a letter of recommendation, I provide a draft. There are going to be also some faculty that ask you a set of questions so that they can be more familiar with your relationship. Maybe it's some time since you've interacted. Maybe they want to understand from your perspective. They have their own, but they want a little bit more input. So be ready to respond to those. Be ready without waiting to be asked again to provide your CV, your personal statement. I swear, guys, I'm not exaggerating. I have gotten jobs because I've been that proactive that I've sent things before the person asked for it. It is a critical piece to be informed and prepared and to make sure you're preparing that writer as quickly, effectively, and efficiently as possible. Now, guys, please feel free. I'm seeing questions come in YouTube. We also have the link across the screen. We have multiple different ways because we got multiple different platforms and everything, but we want to make sure we ask your questions. We see some about the personal statement. We'll definitely get back to that. But jumping ahead, again, another critical way to share information, an onslaught of detail, is your CV. Now, it is definitely not as robust as it will be in the future. We're going to get you there, but we need to make sure that you're listing out and using some real positive language around how you're describing your accomplishments, your publications, posters, presentations. Don't forget any social media sort of podcasts, videos, webinars that you might have been in. I know there's been a great deal of activity, especially from an advocacy standpoint, of a lot of students over the past couple of years. You should be proud of that. You should be able to share that information in a precise manner, and that can be through your CV. Your CV is a great way to even think through how you're actually going to be mapping out your meaningful and impactful experiences that you're going to actually list in the application, right? So it's a good way now, hopefully before now, because we're coming up on the application process opening, but that you're actually collating this information. I update my CV on a very regular basis. I'm also quite OCD. Dr. Clark, I need you to help me with that. But I update it quite regularly because I never want to be caught unprepared. And so I'm regularly updating it in case someone says, hey, would love to, pass on your CV for this purpose, for this committee. We would love to nominate you for and everything. I'm like, oh, funny you ask. I have an updated CV right here. Literally no delay. You're going to need to obviously organize it as best as possible, outlining your experiences. ERAS completely does this, but I guess really, if you're thinking of your career and how you promote yourself and how you list out your accomplishments, you need to obviously do so outside of ERAS alone. So that's where this is such a critical tool to make sure that you are building out the skill set and the language now. You want to make sure that you are telling the full story. Now, I'm not saying all the way back to high school. Guys, we really don't need to. I'm sure you are all fabulous. It's wonderful. But it's really about your experiences that are relative to residency. So maybe there's something in high school, maybe there's a long-term experience that you've had, perhaps that stretches back that long. So I'm not saying completely don't include that, but we need to make sure you're emphasizing something that translates well to the role that you're about to take. Again, that is the role of a resident. So you want to frame it. It's not about, oh, I want to be a physician and I did this great volunteer work. Da, 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 da. How does that volunteer work relate to the role that you are about to assume as a resident in that program? Not only, stretching back to high school, but sometimes the college work is a bit irrelevant because you already got into medical school, right? We already know you're about to be a physician in the coming months. But again, if it's a really meaningful, substantial achievement, especially if it shows kind of the arc, the storyline of how you've been committed to that organization over time, sure, feel free to highlight it in your CV. And again, guys, that doesn't mean you delete it from all versions of your CV. Just it's the one that you're submitting here as part of the application process. So general template, highlighting a couple of points in red that may or may not necessarily be applicable to you, but ones that are quite helpful, honestly, to help us distinguish between students. I hate to say that, but it's really the same. I mean, you guys know this. It's a level of competitiveness, especially in some fields, that we need to make sure we're truly highlighting your strengths. What kind of service you've provided and at what level, what kind of professional experience you've had. I mean, most of us aren't necessarily working through medical school, but your summer experiences. I myself, and I'm embarrassed enough, although not really, I love my CV. I'm embarrassed enough to show you guys a couple portions of it, but my summer experiences completely helped frame and tell that storyline of what I wanted to be, as far as the type of the family physician I wanted to be and how I would be a member of that residency community. Your personal interests are also quite helpful. Again, like Dr. Clark said, we need to have an ability to get to know you as a person. We are about to spend, meaning we, the faculty, with you, the resident, we are about to spend an unnecessary number of hours with you people, right? Like when you come into the program, we are about to be close knit. It is great to have an understanding of some of your personal interests, to have a topic to talk about in your upcoming interviews, and highlighting it there, especially any skill sets, ones that provide a sense of skills. That's going to be helpful as well. All right, I'm going to jump to a question that I see coming in from Facebook, just because it's about CV. Is the CV as a document ever given to the residency programs, or is it just the ERAS application that they receive? At this point, it is typically highlighted through your ERAS application, yes. But what I'm trying to emphasize is you having it as a separate document is a great way for you to organize yourself as you approach your application, that you're not just filling it in cold. And it allows you, as you're thinking about next steps, because I'm always projecting to the future, if you're organizing it on paper here, it'll allow you to really keep it as your own template for where you're going beyond residency as well. So we really do highlight that you maintain your CV even at this point, and then you map it out so that you can make sure you're not missing any of those critical experiences, research projects, and the like that you want to highlight here in ERAS. And then honestly, if you then don't highlight it in ERAS, maybe it's something you put back in your personal statement, or maybe it's something that you work with a mentor or a faculty member to highlight in a letter of recommendation. But if you're not mapping it out comprehensively in your CV, you may miss something. So we want to make sure that you're pulling it all together as succinctly as possible. All right. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with having multiple versions. There's absolutely nothing wrong. And guys, please start standing up your LinkedIn profiles now, right? So again, this isn't just about setting you up for residency, but it's for your career. I'm not lying again, I have hired people off of LinkedIn. I have been hired off of LinkedIn. It is the professional version of all the rest of this madness that is social media as we know it. Translating bits and pieces of it from your CV from what you highlight, or maybe not highlight. Maybe it's another place to highlight additional work that you've done. Because you never know, residency programs are probably screening through social media. If they're smart, they are, because they want to know how you're presenting yourself to the public. Please make sure you focus on that and it's legit. Again, you don't have to take my approach and updating it as OCD as I do. I do it monthly, guys. It's that bad. I do it regularly. But it's also helpful, like with the personal statement, to get some feedback on it. How does it look? And hopefully, as some of you are registered for our mock interview program as part of Road to Residency, please feel free to ask the faculty that you're paired with if they'd be willing to give you some constructive feedback. Spell check, grammar check, like with the personal statement, proofreading is critical. There's no other way around it. I have caught many an error in the CV, and that just looks sloppy. So again, if you're building out your CV, if you're then copying and pasting it over to ERAS, errors just translate, and that's not a good look. So you want to make sure it's not that someone's going to deny you a spot in a program for an error, but it's going to differentiate. It could be memorable. And so the last thing you want is for a negative memory to rest in the mind of someone who's evaluating you. That's all. That's all. And again, I also don't like sloppiness. And the last thing we want is sloppiness on the words with us as well. Again, if you don't spell something right, it's not going to be completely detrimental, but it's going to make you stick out in a negative way. So like I said, I'm not embarrassed. I'm flashing up. Oh, good. You can't really see it. I'm kind of happy. I'm flashing up my CV. This actually just shows the first page. Guys, I'm up to 14 pages now. I'm 10 years up, actually. I'm 13 years out of residency. Had to do the math. So there's no way you should be at 14 pages. My goodness. But what I'm trying to show here is the depth through which I am describing my storyline, my work at the VA, which is that second position there, my current position. This was actually more so when I just started. I literally go in and add bullet points over time. You need to describe your skill sets, your achievements, hopefully in a somewhat objective manner. I'm in leadership roles now. So what budget am I managing? How many FTEs am I managing? What sort of major, projects have I managed? What committees have I chaired? What projects have I led? That's all pretty critical and spelled out in great detail. This is my education and professional training. I've started adding in different virtual courses that I've taken because learning never ends. And after residency, you're going to continue to take courses at different universities. And thankfully, I've had that all paid for because it's crazy expensive. But it's worth listing here because, again, people want to know that I'm looking at population health and patient safety and these additional pieces. And so you're expanding over time. These are all my different involvements, my licensing and certification that's way expanded now just because I'm with a national organization now, professional involvement, community involvement. Again, there's, particularly in academia, there are set templates and you may have seen them. Feel free to ask your faculty or your mentors for their own because every university even has their own template. I'm not in academia, so I just do it however I want. But maybe Frank, I don't know if your university has a structured template that they require as you're looking at your different faculty promotions.
So I just, I was appointed to associate professor last year,
Yes, you
and there, we go through this system of water. I think it's called Watermark, so maybe they've changed the name. But there's things you can fill in,
Mhm.
and different things. But I have my CV tailored a certain way that it's readable. But yeah, I would check with your institution. Everybody has a different way of going
Yeah,
about it. So.
yeah, perfect. All right, I'm flipping through. It's ridiculous. My publications and I love my resume, but I go back and delete regularly. But I resave the new version so that if I need to go back and refer because I'm tailoring the version that I'm presenting at any given conversation, I do that as well too. So again, it's a tool. It's a collection, a collation of important details, a level of detail that honestly needs to mature with you over time. And so that's why we want you guys starting to get comfortable with that now as you're moving forward with the ERAS process. All right. Feel free, please keep dropping some comments. I see a couple coming in. Dr. Clark, I'll read out to you about personal statements from YouTube. You can also use the link at the top of the slides as well too. Dr. Clark, when discussing red flags, how much should the personal statement touch on them? Like what kind of depth do you suggest diving into?
That's a great question. So I would say a couple of sentences. It
Mm,
doesn't need to be like two paragraphs. I would say maybe a paragraph of just summarizing what the if you've had some obstacles in the academic arena at medical school where again you had to repeat a course or so, kind of sum it up. Went through some hardships in medical school and um, this is what I learned from. I don't think you need to list like bullet point one and bullet point two. I don't think you need to get into that much detail. You can save that for the interview, if anything. Like I said, I would be prepared. Anything that's in your personal statement is fair game for people to ask in your interview. So I would just be mindful of how you address it. Again, I don't think you need to go into great detail. Like this doesn't need to be a 5-page essay or something like that. This is literally something, a paragraph of hey, because again, if you look when we look at your MISP, um, the medical student performance evaluation, I think it was called, like they're gonna talk about, if you had any what your grades were, if you pass, fail, how you did in your rotations, and there may be things there that are commented on. So and so did not, pass step one or what have you. So we're going to see that in your application. You can't avoid that. So, but you want to just be able to write succinctly about it. Again, the red flags should not take up the majority of your personal statement, right? It's personal, but it should be talking about things that are positive. And again, you can turn the red flags into a positive. Just make sure you address them. To not address them is going to say to the reader, what is this person hiding?
ooh, good point.
And you
Good
don't
point.
you don't want that to even be, and you don't want to even give any inkling to your readers that you're trying to hide something.
Yeah.
Just be transparent. Again,
Mm,
we would rather you be transparent. And again, it gives something for us to talk about. And if you can address again, not necessarily what happened to you in the environment, in the medical environment, is one thing, and that's important. But I would say equally as important is what did you learn from that experience. If you can speak to that in the
mhm,
personal statement, that's points in my
mhm,
mind, right? Because that says this person has persevered, right? They didn't pass step one, but they met with their academic advisor and they learned test taking strategies that allowed them to pass step one successfully, right? Because and then you pass step two, right? And then you got to do step three, and then you have your board. So make yourself, promote yourself. Don't have this sense of like, well, they're gonna see that I had these things, these red flags, and if I don't talk about them, then it's out of sight, out of mind. Actually, it's
mhm.
quite the opposite. So just be real, and it's no shame. Things happen. Things happen.
Love it. Yeah. I think the other thing is to be succinct with referring to the red flag. Because trust me, they know what it is from another part of your application, right? So you don't have to sit there and use multiple words and characters to describe the red flag, right? What you need to do, like Dr. Clark said, is to describe what you've learned, how you've recovered, and perhaps how it made you either more prepared for the next step, how it made you more prepared for the residency. There's a number of directions that you can go from it, but we need to see your recovery through that red flag. And that's the pertinent piece you need to make sure you address. Describing it and honestly why the red flag exists. Like, I, I hesitate to maybe give like an all out answer to that, but like I really don't want you to dive deep into family issues, mental health issues, not because there's you shouldn't disclose it, but we know things happen, right? So we don't need to know why. We need to know how you recovered. You need to be future looking. It's not about, you should not use your personal statement to justify the red flag. It's to explain how you move forward from it. And I think that's a pretty big nuance there. All right. Skipping around, another one on personal stories. Um, this is a great one. I heard for personal statements, those patient specific stories are so common that they are said to that you should actually focus on experiences that show your skills. Do you agree?
Great question. My response to that is I like a variety. So I think you can do both. I think you can, because going back to some of those patient experiences have helped shaped why you want to go into the field to begin with, or may have shaped. So I think you can do both. I don't think that there's a right or wrong. In fact, when I write letters, letters of recommendation, I do comment on a meaningful patient experience that the applicant had, while in addition to talking about their personal experiences. So um, for me, both are fine. Now, that may sometimes vary on specialty. I'm a psychiatrist, so and so I think, and Dr. Matthews would probably agree as well in terms of being a primary care physician. We think a little bit differently than
Mhm.
our colleagues who are not in primary care. It's not a right or wrong thing. It's just that
Mhm.
I think again you have to know your audience.
Yeah.
So somebody writing about a meaningful patient encounter in psychiatry, that's music to my ears, and so I have no problem with that. So I think again, try to know your audience. I think you're gonna probably get different feedback on that depending on what specialty maybe that you're applying to, but I don't think it's to me, it's not a red flag, and I don't dock people on that because they write about a patient encounter. Now, if your personal statement is this full of patient encounters, that's a different story. I think again, you need a healthy balance of both,
Yeah.
right? You can use one patient encounter and still talk about other meaningful experiences, personal meaningful experiences, or other things that you've seen that have helped solidify why you want to go into the specialty you've
Yeah.
chosen.
And similar to my comment about red flags, it's a personal story not to prove why you want to go into that field or that you want to be a physician, right? Like it's not to prove your emotional attachment to what happened. It is to depict by your involvement in that personal story why you are a good fit for that residency, why you are a good fit for that field. So you need to be choosing the stories to exhibit your skill set, not just a story for story's sake.
Right.
So I think there's a difference there. Everything that you include should, in yes, a very boastful manner sometimes, really be about portraying you, not why you want to be here, but why you're a good choice for that selection committee to make. One more personal statement question. This is a good one. What personal statement writing timeline do you suggest for someone just starting their third year? Should we be thinking about it that early?
Oh wow. That's a great question.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's never too early, but at the same time, I feel like third year, you're still trying to figure out. People change their minds, so you could say like, "Oh, I'm going to be a psychiatrist when I grow up," and you get to third year and you do psychiatry, and you may say, "Oops, nope, I really have a love for OBGYN."
Mhm.
So I don't think you need to start as early as third year. I think going into beginning of fourth year is fine. Especially as you're doing your AIs and what have you. So I think that if you practice makes perfect. Now, I think as you're meeting with your mentors and things, and you want to maybe run some things by them about like, hey, I'm thinking about so and so specialty. How would you recommend I approach my personal statement? Here's my CV. Um, here's who I am. This is my brand. I don't think that's too never really too early to start, but I don't think you have to necessarily start like drafting paragraphs when things may change. I don't think you need to do that. I think third year focusing on the wars, and you're, doing well clinically, and obviously seeking the mentorship, and things like that. But I think it's safe to begin at the as you're starting your fourth year to draft. And one thing with that, don't be um, you're going to have people give you some feedback that you may not always agree with. So at the end of the day, what I share with people is that sometimes you can have too many cooks in the kitchen. So I don't think you need to ask 20 people to review your personal statement. That's too many. Okay, maybe choose 2 or 3 people that you trust, right? And get a diversity of thought and perspective. Okay. um, if
Yep.
somebody says that, excuse my French, this sucks, don't take it personally. Okay.
Oops. Oh, Dr. Clark, I think you froze a little bit. All right. With that, I'm just going to jump to another question. Hopefully, Dr. Clark can join us back. I do see one around letters of recommendation. How do you suggest going about collecting them if you don't spend substantial time with attendings due to the nature of your third year curriculum? I think this is definitely a difficult part, especially when you're really required to do a fair number of your required clerkships during your third year, and you haven't had those relationships. I think this is where using your third year to make some educated decisions. So perhaps this summer, as you're applying to, or as you're thinking about applications into the fall, that you're really thinking about perhaps some visiting clerkships, some acting internships, and the like, where you can get that more hands on relationship. The other piece is perhaps you need to establish those relationships outside of just your typical attending interaction. And so, not just your day to day rotations, definitely not. Please have conversations while you're rounding in the morning and everything. But perhaps you need to ask them if they'd be willing to sit with you for lunch and have a conversation of how they chose their field. Get to know them in a manner outside of your typical interaction. That's where the rubber really meets the road. That's where the depth of the relationship is going to come from. Your regular interactions, to be honest, aren't going to get you the strength of that letter of recommendation that you want anyway. So while you may not be spending substantial time during your current curriculum, you need to be creative enough to find those avenues where you can have that additional time to get to know them. Let's see. You guys have great questions. I love this one, and this is totally down my alley, Frank. Do you have any tips for someone who has no research publications but great leadership and advocacy experiences? Is there a good way to angle this so they don't see it negatively? Hells yes. This is my entire career. I did absolutely no research in undergrad. I did one project in medical school, and it only confirmed that I have absolutely no interest in doing research. It actually helped direct me towards, I got my second degree in law, hence my interest in advocacy work and the like, and my different leadership experiences, particularly in SNMA and onward, really honestly helped frame or I used it to help frame language around what type of leader in medicine I wanted to be, what type of leader I wanted to be in family medicine, how I wanted to be an advocate for my patients. That there's other ways to serve the patients that you're treating beyond just clinical medicine, beyond just the research to find new clinical solutions, but that there's a need, especially in clinical medicine, for us to lead from as physicians. So there's plenty of ways to angle this, Juliana. We can definitely talk about this one on one. You can tweet me, message me. We'll find each other. But this has been entirely my whole career. The research that I've ended up doing was actually way later in my career, where I had the fortunate enough people just started adding me to projects. I loved it. I didn't have to do the research myself, but that's because it was in some of the clinics I was serving, and I was helping direct the research questions from my leadership role, and I love that opportunity. But where you are now applying to applying to residency, it's not a requirement. But again, like Dr. Clark has said multiple times, know your audience. If you are applying in a field that requires research, you better do it, right? If you're applying to programs where that is a strong focus, you better have done it. I knew I was going into primary care. I knew I was going to choose a residency where it wasn't a strong focus. And therefore, I was able to, again, frame my storyline, my arc, that this is my role in medicine, the leadership and advocacy route. Others may need to do research. I will interact with them, but that's not something that I've participated in. And it does not come across negatively at all. In fact, as I'm interviewing those people, I love those people because I think we need more of me in medicine, not just me, people like me. All right. I think I hit all the questions. I'm scanning. You guys have great questions. This is really great. Oh, here's a good one. Sorry. When you say provide a draft of the letter of recommendation, transparently, would this be us creating a letter in the third person that the letter writer can really just sign off on? Kinda, yeah. I mean, you want to make this as easy as possible. Trust me, none of us in our right mind is going to take your letter word for word. We're going to edit. It's always easier to edit. There's more that we want to add. We're going to put our own flourishes on it. But yes, you want to write it as close as possible to me copying and pasting sections of it. So yeah, the answer is write it in third person as if the person is speaking about you. And so you're providing them some language, maybe a few adjectives or so, even though we tend to cut those out. But again, you're going to be able to explain experiences and the importance of those experiences to you better than that person ever could. So great. Oh, more comments coming in. Yay. Oh, hey, Juliana. Good. Would love to connect. I love it. All right. So really quickly, we are coming to the end of our hour. This has been great. I'm going to quickly just pull back up our slides again and just share a couple more highlights, not necessarily of our talk tonight. And feel free to reach out to us on the tour through social media and the like. Joanne, I don't know if you can share my screen again. There we go. Perfect. Wanted to highlight one of our T4D mentors is faculty and really wanted to make sure you guys understood the availability at the Harvard Medical School of a residency program showcase that's coming up on September 9th. Please, please, please take a quick picture of this right now. Look on our social media as well too and register by August 30th. They're going to give you some great insight across all of the different programs available at Harvard. And as we get more notification of opportunities like this, we will definitely share it on social media. As I mentioned, please join us in 2 days on Thursday. Our good friend, Dr. Anani, who gave the lecture last week, he and I will be joining, and we are going to get in depth about the changes, although you guys won't know them as changes, although some of you might have applied previously, but these are kind of throwing us for a whirl as I'm learning about like what is happening to ERAS. There are some changes to the process. I've talked to some students where they felt like their schools didn't necessarily go in depth with a lot of advice around how to approach some of these changes, particularly around the meaningful and impactful experiences Dr. Clark and I have mentioned tonight, geographic preference and the importance of how you designate that, and then signaling of programs. We're going to go into all of this with a lot of information from the AAMC itself, but we want to make sure you guys really, really understand the importance of these different pieces in the application process. For those of you who registered for our mock interview program as part of the Road to Residency, there is still time to do so if you are a SNMA and LMSA member. This is a special member benefit, this program. Even though these webinars, we're streaming them live and they're open to everyone, we have this additional set of specialty panels that are exclusively available for SNMA and LMSA members. These links will be emailed out to the members who have registered for the Road to Residency program. These are specialty based. I'll be leading the family medicine one with a panel of amazing family docs that I've pulled together. We have the other panels here. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to pull together panels for every single residency. We do apologize for that. We are doing our best to add more, but at least for now, we're going to have an amazing opportunity for you to connect quite closely with some program directors, different faculty in each of these fields. It's a new one that we're doing around surgery this year on the 22nd. We have a longer block where we're pulling all the surgery there. And again, if you are a member of SNMA and LMSA, you'll actually get these registration links emailed to you. And the last point to highlight really quickly, we are so happy to offer 2 scholarships this year as a part of the Tour for Diversity in Medicine. One for medical students. It is the Road to Residency Scholarship. It is particularly for graduating medical students. This is to help you pay for your application process, your flights, your hotels, and everything. We are just going to cut you a check. Guys, we don't have a lot of applicants yet. Please, please, please apply. Applications are due September 30th. You have plenty of time. Please apply for this. Our partners at Vituity is sponsoring this. They are really supportive of all of your futures, and we're really grateful for them for helping us provide that scholarship for the first time this year. And then second, I am absolutely proud that we have a scholarship named on honor of my parents, Dr. Warren B. Matthews and Atomi Matthews. It's our new Pathway Scholarship for Pre-Meds. If any of you are here, if you work with any, we are really happy to offer these scholarships for undergraduate students or post-bac alumni. That you don't have to be in college currently, but those who are interested in entering medicine, dentistry, or pharmacy. That is a broader scholarship, but we're very happy to offer a couple of those this year. And we've gotten some great applicants so far, but also due date of September 30th. Please, please, please apply. Take a picture of this QR code right here. And again, this is available across all of our social media. Thank you guys so much. Please follow us on across all of these different venues. Tour for Diversity with the number 4. We really appreciate this partnership with SNMA and LMSA. And thank you guys so much for this engagement tonight. And join us again on Thursday. Dr. Clark, any closing thoughts or comments?
Always a pleasure to co-present with you, Dr. Matthews, and I hope this was helpful and informative for everyone. And thank you for your time and attention and for your great questions. And best of luck to everyone as you enter this new season.
Love it. Best of luck, guys. Thanks for coming tonight. Bye-bye.